The sound of a gavel echoed in the courtroom as the judge declared the final verdict. My name was erased from the family estate, and my inheritance, every cent of it, was handed over to my so-called loving family. My heart pounded as I stared at my parents and siblings, their smug expressions twisting the knife already buried deep in my chest. They had won. They had taken everything. I didn't cry. Not here, not in front of them. That would have given them too much satisfaction. Instead, I stood tall, locking eyes with my mother, the mastermind behind this betrayal. Her lips curled into a faint, victorious smirk. "Outsmarted again, darling," she whispered as she walked past me, the faint scent of her expensive perfume lingering like poison in the air. My knees felt weak, but I clenched my fists, digging my nails into my palms until the pain steadied me. They thought they had won, but this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Hours later, I sat on the curb outside the courthouse, the biting wind of winter stinging my cheeks. My belongings, hastily stuffed into an old duffel bag, sat beside me. The $50 I had in my pocket felt like a joke compared to the $1.3 million they just stripped from me. I thought of all the sacrifices I'd made to support my family. Sleepless nights, covering their debts, even giving up a scholarship abroad because my mother said she needed me close. It was all for nothing. They'd repaid me with lies, greed, and abandonment. But there was something they didn't know. Something I had kept hidden even from myself until now. I wasn't just a victim. I was sharper than any of them. And while they reveled in their stolen wealth, I would rise from the ashes they'd left behind. A week passed, each day a painful reminder of my downfall. I stayed at a cheap motel, eating instant noodles and staring at the ceiling, plotting my next move. That's when the call came. "Is this Sophia?" An unfamiliar voice asked. It was raspy, aged, but there was something oddly familiar about it. "Yes," I replied cautiously. "This is about your grandmother," the voice continued. "She left something for you. Something she didn't want anyone else to know about." My heart raced. Grandma. She'd always been my only ally in the family, the one person who saw through my mother's manipulations. She had passed away months earlier, and her absence had left a void I thought could never be filled. "What did she leave?" I asked, gripping the phone so tightly that my knuckles turned white. "Come to my office tomorrow," the voice instructed. "You'll see." The next day, I found myself sitting in a dimly lit office, facing an elderly lawyer with a mountain of documents spread across his desk. He handed me an envelope with trembling hands. "Your grandmother was a wise woman," he said. "She knew what your family was capable of, so she left this for you. A safety net." I opened the envelope and gasped. Inside were the keys to a small property on the outskirts of the city, a letter in her elegant handwriting, and a bank statement showing a hidden savings account with $200,000. The letter read, "My dearest Sophia, I always knew you were destined for greatness. If you're reading this, it means the family has done what I feared they would. But don't let their betrayal break you. Use this gift wisely. Build something they can never take from you. Love, Grandma." Tears streamed down my face as I clutched the letter. This wasn't just a gift, it was a lifeline. With my grandmother's savings, I rented a small apartment and poured every ounce of energy into creating a plan. My family thought they'd ruined me, but they underestimated one crucial thing. I had inherited my grandmother's cunning and resilience. The property she left me turned out to be a small cafe she had owned decades ago. It was run down and abandoned, but I saw potential in its faded walls. I decided to reopen it, not just as a business, but as a symbol of my rebirth. The first few months were grueling. I worked day and night, learning everything I could about running a business. Slowly but surely, the cafe started to come alive, attracting customers with its cozy atmosphere and homemade recipes. But this was just the beginning. I wasn't just building a cafe, I was building an empire. I barely slept during those first months. By day, I worked at the cafe, scrubbing floors, baking pastries, and perfecting recipes. By night, I pored over books and online courses about business, marketing, and strategy. Every dollar I earned went back into the cafe, repainting walls, replacing broken furniture, and creating a warm, welcoming space. The community started to notice. Customers trickled in, drawn by the smell of fresh bread and the sight of a young woman rebuilding something from scratch. They didn't know my story, and I didn't tell them. All they saw was my determination, and it became infectious. One customer, a kind older man named Mr. Harris, visited every morning for coffee. He always left a generous tip and offered me advice. "Keep your chin up, young lady," he'd say. "People love a fighter. Give them a reason to believe in you, and they'll come back." 6 months after opening, the cafe was finally turning a profit. I renamed it Grandma's Haven in honor of the woman who had given me the chance to fight back. The name caught attention, and soon, word spread about the cozy little cafe with the heartwarming story. But my ambitions didn't stop there. I started hosting community events, book readings, charity drives, and open mic nights. The cafe became more than a business. It became a gathering place, a home for people who needed one. With every success, I felt a fire burning inside me. A hunger to do more, to prove to myself and my family that I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. One day, while preparing for a busy Saturday morning, I glanced out the window and froze. Standing across the street was my mother. She hadn't seen me yet, but the sight of her made my stomach churn. She was dressed in designer clothes, her sunglasses perched on her nose as she scanned the area. What was she doing here? Did she know about the cafe? I ducked behind the counter, my heart racing. I wasn't ready to face her. Not yet. Not until I had something so undeniable, so powerful, that she couldn't dismiss me as the failure she thought I was. After that day, I doubled down on my efforts. I expanded the cafe's menu, introduced catering services, and partnered with local farmers to source fresh ingredients. Every move was calculated, every decision part of a bigger plan. With the profits, I started investing in small properties, rundown buildings that others overlooked. I renovated them, turned them into rental spaces, and watched as my income grew. It was slow at first, but I was patient. I knew this was only the beginning. 2 years after the betrayal, my cafe had blossomed into a thriving business, and my real estate ventures were gaining momentum. That's when I saw my sister, Lily, walk into Grandma's Haven. She looked different, tired, worn out, as though life hadn't been as kind to her as she'd expected. She didn't recognize me at first. She ordered a coffee and sat by the window, scrolling through her phone. I walked over, placing her drink on the table. "Long time no see, Lily," I said, my voice steady but cold. Her head snapped up, and her face went pale. "Sophia," she whispered, her eyes wide with shock. "Surprised to see me alive and well?" I asked, a hint of a smirk playing on my lips. "You didn't think I'd go down that easily, did you?" Lily stammered, trying to find the right words, but I didn't give her the chance. "Enjoy your coffee," I said before walking away, leaving her to grapple with her emotions. She didn't stay long, but her visit was enough to send a message. I wasn't the same person they had cast aside. I was stronger, sharper, and more determined than ever. Over the next few weeks, the rest of my family began to appear. First my father, then my brother, and finally my mother. Each visit was carefully calculated on their part, but it didn't take long to figure out why they were there. Their lives hadn't turned out the way they'd expected. The inheritance they'd stolen was gone, squandered on bad investments and lavish lifestyles. They were desperate, clinging to the hope that I might be their savior. But I wasn't the same naive girl they had betrayed. This time I held all the cards. When my mother finally approached me, her face was a mask of false humility. "Sophia," she began, her voice sickly sweet. "We need to talk." I crossed my arms, leaning against the counter. "Talk about what, mother? How you stole my inheritance? Or how you lied to me my entire life?" She flinched but quickly recovered. "We made mistakes, yes, but we're still family. Can't we move past this?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Family? You're only here because you need something. Don't insult me by pretending otherwise." Her composure cracked, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. "Please, Sophia, we're struggling. We need your help." I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I let her stew in her desperation, savoring the shift in power. They had taken everything from me, but now the roles were reversed. I'll think about it, I said finally, my tone icy. But don't expect any favors. You reap what you sow. The days following my mother's visit felt surreal. I couldn't shake the image of her pleading face, the cracks in her usually unshakable demeanor. She had always been the one in control, pulling the strings and orchestrating everyone's lives. But now the power had shifted and it felt intoxicating. But it also felt heavy. I wasn't the vindictive type, despite what they'd done to me. Part of me wanted to see them suffer, to make them feel every ounce of the pain they'd caused. But another part of me, the part Grandma would have been proud of, wanted to rise above it. I didn't want revenge to consume me. Still, I wasn't about to let them off the hook so easily. My brother, Alex, showed up next, unannounced and looking as haggard as the rest of them. He sat across from me in the cafe, his hands fidgeting with a napkin. I need to talk to you, he said, his voice low. I raised an eyebrow. Let me guess, you need money? His face reddened and he avoided my gaze. It's not like that, Sophia. I made some bad decisions. I leaned back in my chair, studying him. Alex had always been the golden boy, the one who could do no wrong in my mother's eyes. Seeing him like this, vulnerable, ashamed, was both satisfying and unsettling. What kind of bad decisions? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. He hesitated before finally admitting, I borrowed money from the wrong people. A lot of money. If I don't pay them back. His voice trailed off, but I didn't need him to finish. I knew what he was implying. Over the next few weeks, I made them all squirm. My mother, father, Alex, and Lily each came to me separately, each with their own sob story. They wanted forgiveness, but more than that, they wanted help. They wanted me to save them from the mess they'd made of their lives. But I didn't give them an answer right away. Instead, I let them feel the weight of their choices, just as I had been forced to feel mine. In the meantime, I focused on expanding my empire. I acquired a second cafe, then a third. I hired staff, launched an online store, and started shipping my signature baked goods nationwide. Every success was a reminder that I didn't need them. I had built this life on my own. One evening, while sorting through some old files Grandma had left behind, I found something that made my blood run cold. It was a contract, a legal document signed by my parents, agreeing to sell a portion of Grandma's estate to cover their debts. The sale had happened years ago, before her death, and it explained why they were so desperate to get their hands on my inheritance. They had gambled with what wasn't theirs, assuming they could replenish it before anyone noticed. But they hadn't, and now they were paying the price. The next time my mother came to the cafe, I handed her the contract. Care to explain this? I asked, my voice cold. Her face paled as she read the document. Where did you find this? She asked, her voice trembling. Does it matter? You lied to Grandma. You stole from her, just like you stole from me. She opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off. Save it, Mother. I don't want to hear your excuses. For the first time, she looked truly defeated. Sophia, please. We're your family. I stared at her, feeling a mix of anger and pity. Family doesn't do what you did to me. You only care about me now because you need something. Well, guess what? You're on your own. Despite my anger, I couldn't deny that a part of me still cared about them, about the idea of family, if not the people themselves. So I made them an offer, one that would test their sincerity. I'll help you, I said, looking each of them in the eye. But there are conditions. My father frowned. What kind of conditions? First, you admit what you did to me, publicly. No excuses, no justifications. Second, you agree to pay back every cent you stole from Grandma's estate. I don't care how long it takes, you will repay it. And if we refuse? My mother asked, her voice icy. I shrugged. Then you get nothing. True to form, my family tried to negotiate, but I held firm. If they wanted my help, they had to earn it. Eventually, they caved. I arranged a press conference at the cafe, where they stood in front of the local media and admitted everything. They apologized for their actions, for the lies, the betrayal, and the greed that had driven them to destroy our family. It wasn't perfect, and I knew some of their regret was performative, but it was enough. The truth was out, and they were finally being held accountable. After the press conference, I sat alone in the cafe, replaying the events of the past few years in my mind. I had fought so hard to rebuild my life, to prove that I was more than their victim. And now I had succeeded. But success didn't erase the scars. It didn't undo the pain they had caused. Still, I felt lighter, as though a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying had finally been lifted. Over the next few months, I kept a close eye on my family. I wanted to see if their actions matched their words. Slowly but surely, they began to change. My father got a job, my mother downsized her lifestyle, and Alex and Lily started paying back what they owed. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was a start. The months turned into years, and my empire continued to grow. What began as a single cafe transformed into a thriving chain of establishments across the region. Each cafe bore Grandma's name and her signature touch, a warm, welcoming atmosphere that made customers feel at home. But I didn't stop there. I ventured into other industries, real estate, consulting, and even a foundation for young entrepreneurs. I wanted to give others the opportunities I'd fought so hard to create for myself. It wasn't just about success. It was about legacy. My grandmother's name became a symbol of resilience and generosity, and I made sure her story, our story, was at the heart of everything I built. As my business flourished, my family continued their journey toward redemption. They worked hard to repay the money they owed, and though it was a slow process, they never faltered. Alex got a steady job in construction and surprised me by attending therapy to deal with his past mistakes. Lily, who had always been consumed by appearances, started volunteering at a local shelter, her time there softening the sharp edges of her personality. My father, who had been a shadow of himself for years, found solace in gardening, creating beautiful landscapes in his small yard. And my mother? She was the hardest to forgive. But even she began to change. She sold her designer clothes, moved into a modest apartment, and started attending community events at my cafes. Though she rarely said the words, her actions spoke of remorse. One quiet evening, as I sorted through old papers, I stumbled upon another letter from Grandma, hidden inside the lining of her favorite recipe book. My hands trembled as I opened it, the familiar script bringing a lump to my throat. Dearest Sophia, if you're reading this, it means you've found your way back to the life you were meant to have. I always knew you would, my brilliant girl. But there's one more thing I need to tell you. A secret I kept even from your parents. The letter revealed that Grandma had once owned shares in a luxury resort chain, which she had transferred into a trust for me before her passing. The shares were now worth millions. I was stunned. Grandma's foresight had saved me once, and now, even from beyond the grave, she was ensuring my future. Armed with this newfound wealth, I could have left my family behind for good, ensuring they never had access to a single cent of it. But instead, I invited them to dinner, at my house this time, a sprawling property that symbolized how far I'd come. As we sat around the table, the tension was palpable. My mother was the first to break the silence. Why did you ask us here, Sophia? I took a deep breath, looking at each of them in turn. Because I needed you to see that I've forgiven you, even if I'll never forget what you did. My father cleared his throat, his voice shaky. You've grown into someone we don't deserve, Sophia. And I'm sorry we didn't see it sooner. Their apologies felt genuine, but I didn't let my guard down completely. Forgiveness was one thing. Trust would take longer. With the inheritance from Grandma's trust, I expanded my businesses even further. I opened a training academy for aspiring entrepreneurs, offering scholarships and mentorship programs to help them succeed. The academy became a beacon of hope for people who, like me, had faced adversity and needed a second chance. Each success story reminded me of my journey, and I felt Grandma's presence in every milestone. Though our relationships would never be perfect, my family and I found a fragile but growing peace. They continued to make amends, not just with me but with themselves. Slowly, we rebuilt our bond piece by piece. On the anniversary of Grandma's passing, we gathered at her favorite park to honor her memory. It was the first time in years that we'd come together as a family without bitterness or tension. As I looked at them, my flawed, imperfect family, I felt a sense of closure. We had all grown in our own ways, shaped by the pain and lessons of the past. Years later, standing on the balcony of my penthouse, I gazed out at the city skyline, the cafes, the academy, the properties. They were all tangible proof of my hard work and resilience. But the real victory was something deeper, the strength I had found within myself. Grandma's words echoed in my mind. Build something they can never take from you. I had done just that, and though the scars of betrayal would always remain, they were a reminder of how far I'd come. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, I felt a profound sense of peace. I wasn't just a survivor. I was a builder, a dreamer, and a fighter, and no one could ever take that from me.